One of the key tools used is to monitor how these pressures may affect our economy is the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, produced by our Department of Statistics. According to our most recent press release issued in February 2026, the Consumer Price Index increased slightly by 115.28 in the fourth quarter of 2025. This represents a 0.16 increase compared to the previous quarter and a 0.42% increase in the compared to the fourth quarter of 2024. When looking at the year as a whole, overall inflation for 2025 remained below 1% at approximately 0.92%. This indicates that price movements across most categories remain relatively stable during the year. However, when we examine the details behind those numbers, we begin to see where certain pressures may be emerging. Food and non-alcoholic beverages increased by 2.31% between 2024 and 2025. And while transport-related costs also recorded increase during the same period. So at the same time, the largest category in the index, which includes housing, water, electricity, gas, and other funds, recorded a decline. That decline helped offset increases in other areas and contributed to the relatively moderate inflation rate recorded overall. What this tells us is that while prices across the economy has remained relatively stable overall, some of the everyday items people rely on most, particularly food and transportations, are already showing signs of upward movement. These are also the categories that typically respond first when global shipping costs rise or simply supply chains experience disruptions. For this reason, the ministry continues to closely monitor these developments so we can better understand how global economic shifts may eventually affect the cost of living here in St. Martin. Of course, it is also important to note that the data reflects conditions prior to the recent escalation of the conflict of the Middle East. Since February 28, when hostiles involving Iran began just 2 weeks ago, global markets have been closely monitoring developments in that region, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical, as stated before, shipping routes. And as mentioned earlier, any disruption there has the potential to influence fuel prices, shipping costs, and ultimately the cost of imported goods. And as a small imported dependent economy, St. Martin must therefore remain attentive to how these evolving global developments may influence future price movements. At the same time, the ministry is not simply waiting to see how these developments unfold. Work is already taking place behind the scenes to maintain dialogue with key stakeholders responsible for bringing foods into our country. Recently, the ministry held discussions with major food importers, shipping companies operating within our supply chain. And these conversations are important because they provide insight into how different parts of the system are experiencing global pressures. Importers have expressed concerns about rising costs and have called for greater transparency in the breakdown of shipping charges, particularly when it comes to the surcharges that may be applied during periods of volatility. Shipping companies, on the other hand, indicated that many of their operational costs are also determined internationally. Fuel prices, port charges, logistic costs, and are influenced by global market conditions that are often beyond their direct control. What these discussions highlight is that every stage of the supply chain operates within the same global environment. Importers, shipping companies, fuel suppliers, distributors, and retailers all face pressures that originate far beyond our shores. Understanding these dynamics is essential because it allows government to determine where intervention may be appropriate and where the greater transparency in the marketplace is necessary. Among the options currently being explored is the possibility of adjusting the excise taxes. Something that governments before us have also considered during previous periods of global economic pressure. And at the same time, the ministry will continue strengthening its monitoring and engaging efforts so that both government and the public can better understand how prices are evolving and where the potential pressures may begin.
I was having an interesting conversation with the law enforcement officer, and in that conversation came out that police officers don't have access to non-lethal means, such as like a taser, mace, and they said that it's not actually in the law to allow for those types of tools or equipment to be used. Can you comment on that? And doesn't that make sense to have those options available to our police officers?
To be fair, I'm not sure what the law here allows, but indeed, that I'm aware of, we don't have, anyone that has mace. I think that there was a while where some of our forces did have mace, but then there was an issue with you also need another agent to counteract the effects of the mace, and then we didn't have those. And so it was, all those technical issues that sound easy, and then once you get into government where we buy one thing and not the other, then you get those type of issues that are unintended as well. But I'll follow up on that to see what our law allows and how that's used. I remember at least, mace and tasers, maybe not, but of course we always see the officers with like the butu, as we call it here locally, which is also a form of non-lethal force as well. But I'll look into what needs to change, if it's possible, if it's not, and why those choices were made. I mean, that's human trafficking, and so that's what you just described. We have a unit here for mensenhandel, mensensmokkel. So if a person, we also have something called we have the NRC, which is the National Reporting Committee. It's actually at the immigration office. We've been looking to have that placed somewhere else, but where victims of human trafficking, human smuggling can come and actually alert authorities to their situation. And again, that can also be done at the police. So I urge anyone in a situation like this to know that you don't have to remain in a situation like that. Of course, when we have indications that there is a situation where there is human trafficking, human smuggling, we are not allowed to deport that person, because obviously then a victim, you would be then subjecting to deportation measures, which is not something that is allowable in that sense. So if we have indications, further research is done and conducted. But of course, if you're not sharing that information with authorities, if we don't notice from the interview, anybody that's picked up, an interview is conducted, questions are asked, standard questions are asked. If there are red flags, then that case is passed on to a different unit to be able to further investigate whether or not this is actually a matter of human trafficking, human smuggling. The prosecutor is called in. So that's a very serious offense, and in terms of, routine immigration controls, if there are no signs, no indications, then we can't be faulted as a government either for enforcing our local legislation.
But this would apply to the majority of Venezuelans on the island, because you have deported people from Venezuela back to Venezuela who then return to St. Martin just because they still have an outstanding loan. And they know that their family, that the illegal bankers know to find their family in Venezuela and know to find the people here. Yeah. So they get death threats if they don't pay back the money.
Again, human trafficking, human smuggling, it's a crime. So I don't know, I think the ministry is... So again, if an individual is in a situation like that, then I urge them to go to the prosecutor, to go to the police, and that matter will be investigated to look into its legitimacy. Sure.
Would you then allow people that are in that situation to stay on the island?
That would depend again on the specifics of that case. I'm not going to say publicly, if you come and say that you're being trafficked or smuggled, I will allow you to stay on St. Martin, because then everybody is going to say they were trafficked or smuggled. Again, this is a very serious crime, and it would have to be investigated. And of course, pending that investigation, we would need to look at what measures can be taken, yes or no. So it's not just, okay, I scream something and then I'm allowed to stay on the island. So, so that would be, again, that person would have to report to the authorities and the proper investigation would have to take place.
SZV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SZV is cardless. Request your My SZV account today and enter the virtual office of SZV. Go to szv.sx and sign up now.
SZV, yeah, your social health insurances.
As I listened to the presentation, I was disappointed, not a bit disappointed because this is the second time the minister, who's very articulate, does her research, comes to Parliament and don't show us what now. What is the plan? The research of this issue stemming from 2017 all the way up in unpaid bills, my question is what now? And I have said this from the beginning, Madam Chair, and it's been a song that has been sung by members of Parliament and members of this government. You were there, you were there, you were there, you were there, but you are here now. And the fact that maybe our coalition was there and there was issues is the reason that you are elected now. Because you had the solution for the people during campaign time. And Madam Chair, for those who like to say you were there, this is a matter near to my heart. 2022, MP Otley donates over 60 iPads to students during COVID. 2021, MP Otley donates hundreds of bags to school. 2023, Minister Otley, in collaboration with ECYS, donates 12,000 sanitary napkins for females to all school boards. This was part one of a two-pronged stage in which ECYS was supposed to continue the collaboration. 2024, Minister Otley starts the NutriKids Healthy Food Program that fed over 160 vulnerable students. I remember when MP De Weaver stood here, and again, she'll defend herself, but voted against the motion for the food program. It clearly stated, you know why? Because too often we are promising things and not delivering. And many people were shocked, but I understood where she was coming from. And I stated that I voted for it because this was a program that I started, and I hope to see that it structurally continued. I also see an article by myself in 2024 asking why the school food programs were not continued. Madam Chair, through you, does the minister think that not having the essential needs affects the vulnerable kids? We were here last week where there were results given that shocked the whole community. Does the minister think that not having the necessity that is needed affects the way that the kids operate and affects the success of the kids? Madam Chair, through you, what is the real reason for not accepting outside donations? Because I get letters, requests. Sometimes my daughter come home and say, we couldn't even print certain things at the school because there was no paper. And then you get a request for a microwave, you get a request for water, you get a request for all of these things. And I'll be damned if I let my child drop down. So if I have to donate and I donate, then let the school turn me back. And I will let the public know the school turn me back from donating what I need to donate when it comes to water or any essential. Madam Chair, the reason for listing certain things is that a lot of things can be done in the interim. What is the effects while we wait on what is being ordered? Madam Chair, political ping pong. political mileage, I would like to ask this question. And I saw a video where a colleague of mine was stating that to the kids that she will relay the message to the Minister of ECYS to ensure that air conditions be put in a specific school. If that was done, I would like it to be acknowledged. If not, I would like to know why wasn't it done, since we're speaking on political ping pong and mileage. Because the kids were excited, they were clapping and the teachers were clapping, so I hope to God that it was done, and if it's done, recognition needs to be given. If it's not, I would like to know why.
What immediate measures is the ministry taking to address the current shortage of sanitary supplies in the public schools? How does the ministry ensure that sanitary supplies are distributed fairly and consistently among all public schools and staff? Each year, teachers and school administration submit lists of urgent needed materials. Can the minister confirm whether these requests are formally reviewed and incorporated into the ministry's procurement process? Numerous complaints have been received regarding the absence of hand wash dispensers in school bathrooms. Can the minister confirm whether all public schools are equipped with functional hand washing facilities? And if not, why this basic requirement has not been met? Are any public schools currently operating under conditions that may pose health or safety risks to students and staff? If so, which schools are affected and what corrective actions are being taken? What steps, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, is the ministry taking to resolve ongoing shortages of essential classroom supplies and instructional materials required by the teachers and students? Has the ministry conducted a recent inventory or assessment of instructional resources and sanitary supplies across all public schools? If so, what were the main findings? Can the minister provide a clear timeline for when schools currently experiencing shortages will receive the necessary supplies and resources? What budget, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, allocations have been made in the current fiscal year specifically to address sanitation, maintenance, and supply deficiencies within the public school system? What long-term strategy does the ministry have in place to ensure that public schools remain safe, sanitary, and properly equipped learning environments for the students and teachers? Madam Chair, I also would like to deviate a bit also with regards to, it is of my understanding that we keep hiring people from the outside to come in to work in our public school system. If this is not so, I will stand corrected. Why aren't we taking note of the students that we have sent abroad in order to fill those applications here? What is being done, through you, Madam Chair, for the students as well, to attract them to come back home and work and serve St. Martin? Thank you, Madam Chair.
SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXV, yeah. Your social health insurances.
My fellow Barbadians, I address you today on matters pertaining to my ministry. And regrettably, on the heels of recent multiple murders and gunplay which took place on March the 9th. Let me say at the outset that my responsibility is clear. My job is to work with the police, with the courts, with the prosecutors, with the prison service, and with every part of the criminal justice system to make sure they have what they need to do their job, and indeed to do it well. That means funding where funding is needed. That means equipment where equipment is needed. That means policy reform. That means research. That means the change or introduction of new laws where new laws are required. And that means modernizing our systems so that our police service and the justice system are fit for the third decade of the 21st century, not resting on systems or practices and rules that were settled 50, 60, 70, or even 100 years ago. So let us be clear about rules. Operational matters are for the police. The minister does not run police operations from an office. The police must be allowed to do their work and to do it aggressively. My duty and the duty of this government is to make sure they have every lawful tool, every piece of equipment, every policy support, every legislative support, and every institutional support they need to execute their duties. That is where we stand. We are going to be aggressive in carrying out our responsibility. And we expect the police to be equally aggressive in carrying out theirs. Because the truth is simple. When disorder is allowed to take root, breaches of the peace follow. And when breaches of the peace follow, crime grows. And when crime grows, ordinary Barbadians become victims. We cannot accept that, and we will not accept that. This is why I will be working closely with my Prime Minister and my ministerial colleagues on building out an aggressive and modern crime prevention policy. Because if we are serious about fighting crime, then we must be serious about understanding crime. And let me say this too. Crime is not limited to any one age group, but we will be making a mistake if we did not focus on the part of prevention or prevention strategy for young people, especially those between 16 and 25. That is a crucial stage of life. And if we are serious about prevention, then we have to intervene early, reach them directly, give them support, direction and alternatives before negative influences take hold of them.
The roiling waters of the Persian Gulf further inflamed after Iranian missiles this morning struck 3 cargo ships, this one manned by the Thai Navy, engulfed by fire. Near one of the world's most critical oil passageways, the Strait of Hormuz, which snakes between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. Maritime groups say in all, Iran has struck at least a dozen vessels there, effectively bringing traffic to a halt and global energy fears to an all-time high. Today, Iran pledged it won't hold back.
We will never allow even a single liter of oil to pass through the Strait of Hormuz for the benefit of the United States, the Zionists, or their partners. Any vessel whose ship or oil cargo belongs to them will be considered a legitimate target.
The situation has caused energy prices around the world to skyrocket. To offset the surge, an unprecedented response from the International Energy Agency, which announced it would release 400 million barrels of oil from its emergency stocks. That's roughly 20 days' worth of the Strait's exports, making it the largest distribution of reserves in history. IEA Director Fatih Birol.
This is a major action aiming to alleviate the immediate impacts of the disruption in markets. But, to be clear, the most important thing for a return to stable flows of oil and gas is the resumption of transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
It all comes amid fears that Iran is preparing to mine the Strait of Hormuz in an effort to shut down shipping altogether. Leaving the White House today, the president said U.S. oil companies should proceed with using the strait and reiterated to reporters what he told Axios, that there's, quote, practically nothing left to target in Iran.
They've lost their Navy, they've lost their Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft apparatus at all, they have no radar, their leaders are gone, and we could do a lot worse.
Still, joint US-Israeli attacks continue across Iran. This explosion sending shockwaves through the northwestern city of Tabriz. And in the capital, bombs gutted neighborhood shops like this one. A new Israeli intelligence assessment revealed that Iran's newly installed supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was lightly wounded at the start of the war. Israel's defense minister today vowed to carry on for as long as it takes.
We will continue to act and crush this regime and its strategic objectives in Tehran and throughout Iran, day after day.
Israel's campaign against Iran includes strikes on Hezbollah, the Iran-backed proxy group in Lebanon. There, attacks ramped up beyond Hezbollah strongholds in Beirut's southern suburbs today and continued to hammer southern Lebanon. So far, well over 500 have been killed and some 700,000 displaced.
I want to go back to my hometown. I'm afraid. I'm scared for myself. There are strikes here and there are strikes there. I'm confused about where to go.
And Iran's counterattacks have escalated to what its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps called today the most intense yet. Missile remnants lay scattered in central Israel after Iran said it's increasing its use of cluster munitions against them. Eyewitness video captured the moment an oil depot in Oman blew up after it was struck by an Iranian drone. Oman had been the chief mediator between the US and Iran before the US and Israel launched the war. And 2 drones fell near Dubai International Airport, one of the world's busiest, continuing Iran's strategy of destabilizing its Gulf neighbors and energy markets. Here in Qatar, Iranian attacks ramped up too, with multiple incoming missile and drone launches intercepted throughout the day. A foreign ministry spokesperson for the country, which was previously a key neutral negotiator between Iran, the United States and Israel, said Qatar reserved the right to defend itself if necessary and had no plans to reconsider its strategic alliance with the United States over Iranian attacks on US bases in the region, but affirmed its belief that the only way this conflict will come to an end is via diplomatic means and urged all parties to come to the negotiating table to avoid any further escalation. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Leila Malana Allen in Doha, Qatar.
This is our SXM Daily Newscast. Thank you for joining us.